recording.
Old minutes, we didn't have the most recent ones.
Okay, and who was that? Was that Kevin?
That was Kevin, yeah. So
Okay.
I just mailed him back about, I don't know, around 6 o'clock and said he didn't have the latest ones, and I resent them to him. So
Well, were those the meetings of the 18th or were those the September meetings?
that was for August 19th.
Okay, well, then you know what? I'm going to postpone this with your agreement until Kevin can be heard from at around 7:30. Does that meet with everyone's approval? All right.
That's fine.
Okay, so Kate,
Yes.
let's move on to the treasurer's report and any other lovely things that you would like to tell us.
So I missed the last meeting. My apologies for that. I have since then paid, I believe, just give me 1 second. I'm just in my, I've paid the September and October internet bills. And then I also submitted payment for our recording secretary services for 2 months of Dave's excellent work.
Okay.
And that is it. Food for thought is that I am pretty sure by, I want to say November probably is when I will need to meet with Brian Valentine again to discuss the budget for next year. So just food for thought for people as we get closer to that I'll need to present a new budget to him.
Well, I have some good news relevant to that. I heard from Jason, our IT guy, and from Mark Purple, and hopefully this business with the internet should be concluded by the end of the month.
Wonderful.
We should be able to jettison this horrific, crappy service. It turns out that the townhouse has 300 meg upload when we're paying $120 a month for 75 or something like that. So.
Yeah. No, and I know that they've been working on it, and it's been frustrating for them on their end too. So, and thankfully they knew that it wasn't that they still allotted us the required money in our budget, knowing that dealing with the internet company was going to take a little bit. So there's at least that's a positive. So and thankfully Dave's been submitting invoices to me too, so I'm able to get him paid too.
At the end of this, presuming we go out in October, what would we have left approximately? Do you know?
I do know. Let me see if I have my latest monthly report. I might not have printed it out. No, I don't have it printed out, but I can. So I can tell you that we are probably, bear with me for like 1 second. We're probably at about $2,700 probably.
Left or spent?
Left.
Left.
Yeah.
Well, so what I'd like to propose is potentially spending money on 2 capital purchase items. As you know, I have, through the society, decided to launch these tours. I went last week with the trails folks down through the dam area down in Fayetteville, which was absolutely phenomenal. Oops, Dave, do you have your hand raised? Did you need something here?
No, I'm trying to adjust my camera. It's falling.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so it was great fun, and it was hugely instructive. There were 30 to 40 people, and I was thinking that I immediately got back home and said, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing this? There are so many tours that, in combination with the Historical Society, that we could lead, and we could be a proactive force in the community instead of, this dreaded enforcer of zoning bylaws. So I think one of the things that I would love to be able to do is that, not immediately, but if we have some money left over, is to purchase the headsets that are required for these walking tours, because that's the one thing that was missing from this process with the trails folks. Normally there's, if you've gone on any of these walking tours, the guide has a headset and everyone else has a little earpiece thing. They're a wonderful asset, and I think we could put some really good use to that, not only for these fall tours, but continually through, because I can think of all sorts of things we could tour: Latticequama, Chestnut Hill Farms, Corderville. We could do this annually as kind of a fund, not fundraising, I'm still at this society, but a PR event to say, hey, we're here for good purposes too, as opposed to just telling people what they can and cannot do. The other thing I wouldn't mind spending some money on is that our computer backup has died. The drive for all the historical photo backup, we just found out about this. It hasn't been backing up for 78 days. Fortunately, it's also backed up online. That's not a huge expense. It's $169. The headset thing would run about $800 for a combination of 30 headsets. So I'd like to put that out there. I don't need you to think about this right this second. But if it's something that we could go in with the society, or if we had the budget to do so that we don't force that onto them, I think that would be great and very much part of our mission.
Michael, did you mean out of this year's budget or proposing for next year's budget?
No, out of this year's budget.
Okay. Personally, I think those are great purchases. From the treasurer's perspective, our budget this year just is kind of down to the penny, especially picking up paying for recording secretary services.
So
But
that was my question. Do we have any extra money in the budget?
right now, probably not. Let me, but if indeed the internet then is covered, if those payments get picked up so that for a number of months, we don't have to pay that, we might be able, I can figure out some of that math.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be able to say yes or no that we would have those funds right now. But if you let me sort of report back at our next meeting, I can do that.
Perfect.
Does that sound reasonable?
That sounds reasonable.
Okay.
Any other discussion on this matter?
Michael, I did talk it over, and I wonder if we're crossing boundaries somewhat. That's a historical society activity revenue for the non-members. You had listed at $25 or whatever per. So the revenue goes there, but the expense comes here. I don't know if that makes sense.
Jim, I had the same observation on that.
Well, all I can say is that we generally do spend money, budget money, to support the society. I mean, for instance, we bought this camera.
I can speak to that, Michael.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, typically, guys, we have been able to do that. The Historical Commission, as long as we pay for our functioning expenses, and then when I typically meet with Brian Ballantyne and let him know what we're budgeting for, but a certain portion is often for historical related things like archive materials. We've bought a camera in the past, things like that at least that support the mission, and especially if it's kind of a combined mission and goal. So I appreciate that concern, and I can certainly ask questions about it if people would prefer for me to do that. At this point, I think it is something that we've done a bit here and there with no issue.
That was my only question, is that are we going to run afoul of anything if we cross over the boundary in terms of who's buying it, who's using it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a question or not even.
The only person who would be buying and using it would be us, with the exception of maybe I would offer it to Trails, because they meet at the museum and are a wonderful companion group. The new sets are really kind of cool. I've been looking into this. They the units actually sit in a case, and each little unit recharges itself. So you plug in the case. Because years ago the batteries would die and you would fall apart, and it's like you couldn't hear anything. So I think it's something that would last a decent amount of time. I mean, worst case, the society will pay for it, but if we have some budget left over, I would like to propose that as our contribution to the historical educational aspect of Southborough.
I'm generally
historically at year end, I've been able to get a few things like that. Like I said, archive materials, things like that. And I will crunch some numbers and figure out what money we would have. And it will depend on when the internet really is paid for by the town, when we have to stop paying for that. And then, like I said, if people would prefer that I ask some questions around that, I'm perfectly happy to talk with Brian Ballantyne about it too.
Well, we can do that since we have to talk in November anyway, and it won't be before then anyway.
Yeah,
We can
Sure.
have discussions all together.
you got it.
Are we in agreement with that, everybody?
Yeah, and generally, I like the idea. I think it's a great add-on to the services and programs, but I just want to make sure we don't run afoul of any problems.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. On our next agenda item was supposed to be the public hearing for, where did my agenda keep going? There it goes. I have so many monitors here. I have to like be in space control. Public hearing for demolition permit for 22 Edgewood Road. The building department failed to send this out in a timely fashion. I don't know why. Further, they failed to tell us that they didn't send this out in a timely fashion. Didn't notify us, didn't notify repeatedly the applicant. I've written to Mr. Kiley and apologized. We will have until I believe the 8th of November to reschedule this, so we will put this into our next meeting.
Oh.
And apologies again to Mr. Kiley for this inexplicable lack of communication. All right, next on our agenda, we have town council. Hooray! Our new town council, welcome, 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 welcome. At least we think you're welcome. Are you welcome? Wait, you're muted, my friend. There you are.
Glad to be.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here. All right. So, Jay, which do you think we should talk about first, the rules and regulations or the changes to the bylaw?
I think probably the bylaw, because there's some preemption on the bylaw of the regs, the regs follow the bylaw.
Okay.
So I thought the changes, with the exception of that one provision that I thought was a little beyond, were pretty good. I think, Michael, we had an exchange of, and I don't know if you want to do you want to share screen with that? Does that make some sense?
That's what I'm looking for here. I'm just looking for that. Rules and regulations, proposed changes. Okay. All right, so I'm going to share this screen. Hang on. Share screen. What screen do I want to share? I want to share that one. Okay. Okay, can everyone, whoops, you don't need to see donor materials. Can everyone
Can
see
that be made bigger?
Can that be made bigger? It could potentially be made bigger. There we go. Okay, can everyone see that now?
Not quite.
Not quite.
It's very hard to read at the scale it is now.
Yeah, I don't know why it's sharing like that and not a full screen. I don't know if there's.
Okay, I can, you know what I can try? Hang on. I can try sending it back.
If you let me share screen, maybe my version will.
Yeah, yes, you're probably much more capable than this than I am.
No, I wouldn't say that, but
Okay, change, I'm just gonna make you co-host here, Jay, so you should be able to do
Okay.
your stuff.
all right.
Can I ask just a really quick question before we get into reviewing these details in the document?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I was looking at this document that Michael, you circulated today, and then also the marked up version of the bylaw that you had circulated back on September 8th. And they actually appear to be there's some small differences. And so I just wanted to confirm if this version from today is kind of the master that we're working from currently.
Yes, this version from today is the master we're working from currently.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
So I can't, as disabled,
okay.
so I can't share screen. Somehow I'm disabled here. So maybe it's because you're sharing screen.
Oh, that may
So
very
you
well.
might have to stop sharing.
Oh boy. Where is my administrator when I need it? Okay.
Fine, I'll use my phone. Can you get me my portable charger?
Hang on. This used to be so easy when we were in the. So when I shared the screen, it went away. So now I don't know how to get back to where we were. Can someone tell me how to stop the screen sharing?
Might be right under the screen share.
Yeah, I don't have the menu bar for some reason, suddenly has disappeared here. Oh, hang on. There. Jay, do you have it now? Because I've now made you co-host. Oh, stop share. There we go. All right. So
There we go.
There we
All
go.
right.
okay.
All right. Let's see here what I can do. All right. How's that? People see that?
I'm
Yep.
good.
Can zoom it.
Okay. All right. So, one thing, Michael, that Michael and I talked about, I don't know how many other people were in on that conversation. So most of these changes were fine. There was one section that I thought went a little bit beyond. Otherwise, my comments were really more marginal, and I moved one thing around. Michael had suggested a way to make that first step after the building commissioner be more administrative, where a mere designee, so the board wouldn't have to go through a meeting in such a short time frame. So the two changes that addressed that I saw, Michael, were one, that it could be a designee, which is fine. I think you might want to give some thought as to who that would be. A member of the board, perhaps, I think might be a good idea. You might want to do. You could always do that in the regs, actually define who could the designee could be. And the other thing that you did was, I think you went from a 10-day to a 30-day on that. I thought that was a good thing too, because sometimes it just takes time. You got to go, you might want to do a site visit. So if the whole commission is going to do it, 10 days is just never going to be enough. And but 30 days is more workable, to make sure that that was kind of within the time frame that's expected. I checked some other demolition delay bylaws, and it seemed totally fine. So though that was a significant change that I thought would be helping some of what you're doing. Aside from that, on the bylaw side, I had some suggestions, get a little more consistent with some of the language, use designee, some places use appointed agent, other places, I moved, you had one thing in the criteria during the first step after the commission or after the referral from the building commissioner stage, where you threw in some federal criteria. I thought that would be better served. You'd be better served if you actually put that in the definition of historical. So in this section here, I took that from down below where you had it during that process, so that it would be more consistent that we're actually talking about a definition here. I think it reads a little better that way. And it also won't create any confusion as to what the definition is. Not the big thing, the H, this H here, this section, I thought that was probably a little bit beyond what we see in demolition delay bylaws. Because I'm not sure that, so no permit for demolition of a building determined to be preferably preserved building shall be granted until all plans for future use and development of the site have been filed with the building commissioner. I'm not sure how relevant that is to what you all have to do. And sometimes the way that development works, people just might not know. So I think that people are entitled to demolition and maybe sell a piece of vacant land if they want. So I'm not sure the purpose of this, and I'm not sure if it ultimately would be enforceable because it could result in an open-ended delay for the demolition. And we know that these demolition delay bylaws should be really just more of a temporary delay. So I had some concerns on it. I think you could perhaps provide something where you would get information on that if it's available, but in terms of having it be a prohibition on the issuance of demolition until those things are done, I thought that was a little bit beyond what you all can do under demolition delay.
So Jay,
Yep.
that language comes directly from the Mass Historical Commission in their model bylaw. So
Okay,
it is literally verbatim from what they recommend. And the reasoning behind it actually has some applicability here to Southborough. We have had several occasions where owners have demolished a building and then have found that they actually didn't have the permits to do what they wanted to do. And so the buildings went down and the site remained vacant. The most substantial of these is this lot that's been vacant now for 20 years on the corner of Route 9 and Central Street, which is the old Winchester Tavern. So I think Mass Historical has found that this clause, which I said is literally verbatim from them, would address those issues.
but
which is
what
big.
does it actually address? I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just saying.
Well, in other
So-
words, so people get, so for instance, in this case on this lot on Route 9, the house was demolished, the tavern was demolished. The owner found that it was not a buildable lot with the modern setback regulations. So instead of rehabbing the building and having the clauses grandfathered in, the zoning grandfathered in, they tore it down and found that it wasn't really buildable by modern setbacks and require all these variances and all sorts of things. So I think the thinking behind this is to make sure that, if people are going to tear this down, that they actually can do what they want to do, as opposed to,
What
tearing
if
it
they
down.
just want to keep their options open?
Well, our goal is to preserve the buildings, not to keep the
No, I know that, but-
options owner for the builders.
Right,
No.
but my concern as counsel is to prevent you from getting sued for a taking. And, and I certainly like and respect Mass Historical, but I think of a scenario by which an applicant could say, I want to demolish this thing and it's essential to my marketing of the site, and you're not letting me, and you don't have the right to do that. Now, I do think what we could do here is put in something that if someone just wants to demolish for whatever reason, maybe they want to sell the property for assemblage, maybe they want to just sit on it, maybe they make a mistake, as you suggested. Whatever the reasons, I think that if we give people an option to at least be forthcoming on that, then I think we're working with something. But this literally could result in a multi-year or perpetual holding back of a demolition permit. And I think the whole spirit, if not the letter, of law around demolition delay is that it is temporary. And that's because of takings law. So it's the open-endedness of it that I'm concerned about. I think if we kept everything that's in there and then added something that gave people an option to just demolish, if that's what they want to do, maybe they just want the open space, I don't know, then I think that could be a way around that concern of mine.
Well, if they just wanted the open space, then they would have the permit to do that.
but they wouldn't be able to demolish.
Yeah, they would, because I mean, if they just wanted to demolish and just wanted the open space, there's no permit required to have just open space.
But that's not what it says here. So if we made it clear that they had, if we like an if any, as long as someone was forthcoming on what they're doing, that's fine. But this appears to require that they have something else in mind. So, because if you wanted to sell property just on spec, I don't have any plans for it, but I think it's valuable. This doesn't allow for that.
Well, can we check and see whether this has been challenged, or whether this has actually been, because I'll send you the PDF that this thing comes from. As I said, it's in their model bylaw. And this was one of the things when we met with them. Unfortunately, the gentleman that was at Mass Historical, Chris Skelly, is no longer there. That was a specialist on this. But this was one of the things that they thought was very important, and they recommend for all of the new bylaws that are granted. So, you know, if
I mean, I'm happy to have that dialogue with them. Ultimately, again, that their review and their suggestions may not have anything to do with taking jurisprudence. So those are my concerns. So I'm open-minded on it, but when it's hard for me to rationalize H with the whole reason why we can't have open-ended demolition delay, which is that we'll get sued. The whole reason it's temporary and that it's just a delay and not a permanent bar is because we're concerned that there's no attachment to any kind of statute as opposed to historical districts that would allow us to essentially preclude development on a piece of property. So that was my concern, but I would be perfectly happy to have some dialogue with Mass Historical on it.
that would be great. As I say, because we're just, you know, we're following their recommendations. So whatever you think is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's fine. When I was going through some other towns' demolition delay ordinances and bylaws, and, the Attorney General sometimes just passes stuff, maybe with a mild admonition, but I see things all the time in bylaws where I'm wondering how they got past the goalie. And by and large, people don't love suing towns, but I would hate to have Southborough be the one. All right, so this is the other provision I had a little bit, again, this under the enforcement thing. And I'm trying to figure out a way to put this into play, the spirit of it, without it being so open-ended. So it says the commission may require that the 9-month delay for issuance of demolition permit be extended for such period as equals the time that any information due to the building commissioner or the commission under either the bylaw or regulations was incomplete or the applicant refused to cooperate with the commission. So what I was thinking of changing here was the way this enforcement would work. So rather than, this kind of contemplates putting the whole thing on the bricks through the enforcement remedy. And what I think what we could do is take this provision and put it up in the procedure section or something similar to this provision that says the commission may continue the hearing in the event that the applicant doesn't provide all the information required under this bylaw and the regulations. That way we're in the procedural throw, we're not preventing demolition. You didn't get through the process. It's not an enforcement thing. It's part of the procedure where at night one, you showed up without the photos or without any of the stuff. Granted, it's not a lot of stuff they have to provide. You didn't provide us with some info. We're going to continue. And, so you could kind of suspend it until, so it's part of the hearing process rather than some after the fact process. Because if you did hold a hearing and then you're saying that you can't issue the demolition delay after you find it to be preferably preserved, there's something contradictory about that. So I think we could accomplish the same thing by tacking this same basic principle and moving, cutting and pasting it back up into the procedural part. So I think that's a better way to capture it. And a little less objectionable, a little less just at our discretion, where after the fact, we can say, hey, you remember those photos? Well, we're not gonna let you demolish until that happens,
So just as a question on that, so at this hearing, at the public hearing for this, if the information were incomplete, we would then continue the hearing and the clock would stop until the next hearing?
Well, I don't think within the 9 months runs from, when does it run from?
Well, it runs from the
Date of
the hearing.
preferable,
Yes,
once it's deemed preferably preserved, correct?
yes.
So you wouldn't get to that date. So you'd be accomplishing the same thing.
Got it. That's fine by me.
It's more defensible for me too. So if I have to defend it and I say, look, they're not complying with the regs, we're not holding them up, they're holding them up. It's easier for me to defend.
Because this has come up a lot where, the information is just not, not sufficient in order to make these determinations. Especially, if the onus has been thrust back on us to try to find alternative solutions from the previous rules and regulations where the onus was thrust on the applicant to find solutions to these problems. So, to the degree that, we need this, whatever information we need, and it's not provided, I think that that would be a critical factor. So if that could be moved around to accommodate that, I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I think even we could probably beef up some of your language in and around this section B or C or D, or, or actually no, in the,
B?
No, so going down into somewhere in like this F area where we can really put the onus on them to say that they must provide all information required and to reasonably make a decision. And the board, we could state quite clearly that the hearing shall remain open. So it's their burden. And I'll give you an analogy. So under say zoning, that a planning board is hearing something for a special permit, the planning board holds all the cards there, and they can say, we're not closing this hearing until we get this information, and the hearing just stays open. As opposed to a conservation commission proceeding where there's a specific regulation where an applicant, and I'm not sure how much DEP wanted to do it that way, but that's how it's been interpreted. An applicant can say, we're done with this hearing. We provided you everything we're doing. We want this hearing closed. So what I'm trying to do is create this scenario whereby you are dictating when there's enough information. Now, granted, there's much less of a discretionary component here. All the most of your discretion is saying, like, we're imposing preferable preservation. And so an applicant could literally, one thing I am concerned about is an applicant could come to you on day one and say, you know what, just impose preferably preserved. We think that it is a historical structure. We don't have the means really to preserve it, but just impose it. So it's slightly different because it's either go or no go for you all versus go with conditions. There's no process by which there's that kind of, it's either preferably preserved or not. So I think we could see a scenario where someone comes in with a skeletal amount of information, and you say, hey, we need some more information. And they're like, you know what? I don't even need to provide it. It's a historical home. Just preferably preserve it. I'll wait the 9 months.
Well, that's what we'd like to try to avoid.
Well, right. But what else can you do?
Well, because if you haven't, if you haven't provided the information, then, the hearing is continually continued.
But why? So I think that process is helpful where someone doesn't want the preferable preservation. When someone comes in and says, it's a, this process, someone's really indignant and says, this process is a joke. And I don't want to do it. And this house is clearly not preferably preserved. And you all say, hey, we just want to go through the process. You might be right, you might be wrong. Why don't you give us these photos or this plan or that or the other thing, and we'll figure it out. And they'll say, I'm not going to do that. That's when this tool comes in. But at the end of the day, the most you could ever impose on someone is a 9-month delay. So if someone is saying like, I agree, preferably preserve it. Let's start the clock. I'll let you over to the property whenever you want. I just don't have the means to preserve it. If you can find someone great, you want to come in and take photos, do whatever, float it around. Okay, but let's just start the clock.
Well, but wouldn't all that information be required on a building permit, demolition permit anyway, by and large?
No, they don't need any of that.
Well, they do according to the bylaw. I mean, they have to, I guess I don't quite understand the situation. I mean, you'd still have to have granted whatever they say, okay, we want it to be preferentially preserved and start the clock, but we'd still have to go through the same motions of meeting, deciding whether it was historically significant, then setting up another meeting, and then going through the, because we don't have the ability to designate an agent as we previously did. So I don't see how this would be any different.
Well, I mean, but if you hold a hearing, so you could take all 30 days of the second step. So 7 days, then 30. You could take all of that to make the decision on historically significant. You could take all of the days, the 45 days or whatever it is, to commence the hearing. But at the hearing, if someone says, preferably preserve it, this isn't a question. I'm conceding it 100%. I don't know what right you would have to delay it. And if you said, hey, I want to see the photos, like, well, we don't care about, why would we care about the photos if we're giving you the opportunity to preferably preserve it? Go ahead, preferably preserve it. We support that. We support you finding some other agency to come in and buy my property for the same amount that I would sell it for.
Well, so I think we'll get into some of this discussion on the rules and regulations, which is why we've requested on the draft what we've requested. But in order to get that information, in order to say, okay, we'll undertake trying to find another buyer for this, we'll undertake, doing this, we need to have a set of information. We need to know the plot plan.
But that's not part of, so this is where we kind of butt into an area that has caused me some concern. Is that's not what demolition delay is. That's something you all can do on the side. But your rights under the bylaw and under demolition delays in general is either preferably preserve or don't preferably preserve, delay or don't delay. And if someone concedes that they're going to delay, then everything you do on the side, you already have a requirement in there, which is legal, that says that they have to cooperate generally with it. And that seems to be across, I think it's a curious thing, but it seems to be in a lot of different demolition delay bylaws. So they still have to cooperate, but they don't really have to lift a finger ever if they're conceding the preferable preservation and the 9-month delay.
Well, don't you think that's a problem?
I think it's unfortunate. So like you all, I'm a supporter of preservation of historical buildings, and I wish we had more tools to do it. Now we do have some tools. Demolition delay is one tool in the toolkit. Historic districts, historical preservation restrictions, CPA monies, and other assorted things. We have some tools out there. Do I wish that we could do more, that we could compel people to not do something that they might otherwise be entitled to do with their property? Sure, I do, I suppose, from a kind of paternalistic viewpoint, and as from someone who's really pro conservation and preservation, absolutely. But as a lawyer, I'm not sure ultimately what we can do. I think we can try and tackle as much as we can within the four corners of demolition delay. But if you have someone who is agreeing with you that demolition delay should happen and that they are willing to submit their property to that, this process is done. You can pool your resources, go to CPA, go to historical societies and other things to maybe try and talk them out of it during the 9 months, which is why there's a delay in the first place. But I don't think you can prolong a process artificially.
Well, I don't think we're talking about prolonging it. I think we're talking about getting the adequate information. You know, in some ways, I think this is a moot point because this is the carrot, this is a stick. The carrot is in, if you cooperate with us, we may release you sooner. So if they really want to do this development and they would send the information or whatever we required, then they're let out potentially early. And we have done historically. So and I will also say that no one has ever come to us and say, we want this preferentially preserved.
No, I know, fair, but I've seen it before. So.
Yeah, I mean, you never know in this town, but
yeah.
You know, I agree. I don't think there's much that can be done here. But if they don't give the information, then they sit for the 9 months. I guess that's, you know, but if they do give the information and help us, then they could potentially get out earlier.
Well, I think that's something that can be discussed during the hearing. If someone said, look, I don't have the means to do it. And I said, look, you could say, you know, if you provided us with some more information, maybe this could be a shorter time frame.
Yeah, and we have done that. I mean,
and that discussion can happen. But if someone says, hey, let's close this hearing, let's do this. Let's do it right now. I'm fine sitting the 9 months. It fits my schedule anyway. I'm going to Europe for a few months, you know, whatever it may be, however quirky people are, you know, I'd love to expand your power, which is why I like the 30-day increase. I like the fact that you can do more things with the designee. I'm somewhat supportive of some of the requests for more information on once we get to the regs. But the additional, some of the other criteria here, there are some other good bylaws that I saw in some coastal communities that I thought you could probably increase the scope here to a certain degree. But you know, I'm mindful of the limits of what you can do. So, or my concerns as to what bad could happen to the town if someone challenged one of these things. So,
well, heaven forbid, heaven forfend, we should go rogue. So obviously, we want to try to keep this above board as possible. So I guess what you're saying is that, you know, there's some more tweaking to this. Obviously, not going anywhere anytime soon, but you know, by and large.
I think you're on the right track here on a lot of this stuff here.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think there's some good improvements, some increase in your flexibility as a board. So I think that there's some good stuff here. And I forget, I was looking at maybe Hingham or maybe a Cape Town or one of the Martha's Vineyard towns had some good models in there too. You know, it's just shades of gray a little bit, but you know, hunting and pecking around, you find some things where you get a little bit more discretion each time. Usually it's more discretion on what you're preserving than the process itself, because again, we all, as lawyers, we feel somewhat limited by the length of time that we can get these delays before someone cries foul. But you know, other than that, I thought most of this is fine.
Okay.
And I'd look forward to talking to anyone at MHC as to my concerns about the provision up there.
All right, let me see if I can find you the contact. As I said, Chris Kelly's gone, so I don't know if they've appointed someone as their new DGBL czar, which is what he was, but I'll find out and let you know.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see if I can put up this other.
Before we leave, I'd like to open this up to the rest of the commission.
Can we? Good. And before we go to the other document?
Yeah, exactly. Does anyone else have any questions, concerns, questions for our esteemed town council?
No,
here?
don't call me
I
that.
have one quick question. Back when we were discussing section H, and Jay mentioned that he'd be willing to talk with the Massachusetts Historical Commission. Are we making that an action item?
No, because that's for town council.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave. Commission members. Any questions, concerns?
I do, a couple of things. One of the things about this bylaw that strikes me is that it has requirements for property owners that acquired a property prior to it was put in effect. And I guess I'd be interested in Jay's opinion. To what degree can a property owner push back and say, you know what, this was not here when I bought this house. How is it you can make me do things about the use of my own property? Is there a basis there?
You mean like a grandfathering argument?
Yeah, something like that. Saying, you know, this wasn't here when I bought the property. How can you impose this on me?
So grandfathering, and we're supposed to stop using that term, that says the Mass Supreme Judicial Court. So I don't know what term I'm supposed to use. But
Grand peopling.
yeah, but people that have vested rights prior vested rights, I think that argument is unique to zoning more or less, and maybe a few other provisions scattered throughout land use permitting. And under general bylaws, there's no such thing as vested rights or grandfathering. You're not entitled to it. I could pass a bylaw tomorrow that applies to every single property in town, and it just applies. That's a unique creature to zoning. So in fact, I would venture a guess that no modern demolition delay bylaw existed at the time that the primary targets of their delay were constructed. So if we're talking houses over 75 years or 100 years or whatever it is, I don't think the advent of demolition delay bylaws goes back that far. So grandfathering would destroy it altogether.
Okay, so Jay, just to make sure I understood, you're saying that these kind of grandfathered or vested rights typically apply to zoning, but not other areas, correct?
Not general bylaws, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
The follow-on question is, are we looking at all of the changes, Michael, to the document? In other words, I didn't compare it to the original or the one that's currently on file. Is this everything that's being currently proposed?
This document, I think, I'll jump in, is I believe the prior red line that was sent to me in a PDF with all the changes accepted as of September 8th or so. So, and then the red lines that you see here, I think are largely mine.
Right, I understood that, Jay. I was trying to understand, do we have, if we take any set of changes, is this everything that would be changed compared to the original, or has some iteration already occurred? What I'm trying to understand is the process. If we're going to update this, does it have to then have a compare, stare and compare at the original one, or how does an update get put in place? I'm wondering about how that happens. Does it become a whole new town meeting?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a town meeting vote.
Yeah.
How that's presented to town meeting is can be done a few different ways. It could be done in kind of a red line fashion. My general feeling from a strategic standpoint is that if it was at all a close question as to whether or not town meeting liked or didn't like a bylaw, and I don't know if that's true or not true here, then red lines are confusing and people tend not to like them if they see a ton of red lines. And that a better methodology in that instance can sometimes be to essentially replace the prior version with the new version, and then maybe you could have an attachment available for town meeting, but that's all future stuff, how it gets actually packaged for town meeting. And I trust you all would have open forums and discussions, so you'd have some good feel as to how widespread the acceptance of your changes are, and you can make a strategy decision based on that. And just, town meetings can be fickle, as we know.
Oh,
You
that's
want
kind
to, you want to give it the best chance of success possible. So how it's presented sometimes can be important, but that's all out there in front of us.
but you're saying basically that it's up to us whether we show it as changes or show it as replacement. That's really a strategy question.
Well, I mean, it's up to the selectmen too, because they're the ones that put it on the warrant, but I'm sure they want something as clean and concise as possible. So they're the ones that have to be willing to put it on the warrant.
Thank you. That's all I had.
So I have one comment to add here. So this is actually the first time we've, as a commission, discussed these recent changes to the demolition delay bylaw since Michael's circulated the updated his updated red line on September 8th. And I just wanted to voice that I'm actually not really in favor of the addition of the designee. My feeling is that, this is pretty much the main responsibility of our commission. And I feel like it takes quite a bit of responsibility away from individual members of the commission if we aren't kind of all on the same page and have a vote on whether properties are significant or not. So I just wanted to voice that, since we haven't had a chance to talk about the changes that had been proposed.
So Andy, let me just comment on that a little bit. So first of all, my review is not based on the good or the bad of any of that. It's just to point out that, if that's a goal, then it was accomplished in this draft. That said, I think that would probably be the part that you'd see some pushback on. So if it ends up being, if you guys had 10 things you wanted to do and you wanted to make sure that that the best things got passed, that one could end up being sacrificial to a certain degree. I do like increasing the 30 days if you're going to keep it as the commission, so that
Yeah, agreed.
just, you guys are all busy, you're all volunteers. Annie, I think you have a little kid at home. Did I hear that before? So
Yes.
it's
6 weeks.
sometimes hard to get together.
Right.
So I do like the 30 days. I do think some people will question the designee thing. You'll see that I put a comment in there like, well, exactly who is that designee?
Mhm. Yeah.
Is it someone voted by the commission? Is it the chair of the commission? You don't have a full-time staffer.
Yeah.
So,
So, I mean, we pretty much meet monthly. So I think by extending that timeline to 30 days, I don't see a reason why we couldn't convene the commission within that timeline to have the full, the full commission, voting on those matters.
So just in terms of procedure on this, what I wanted to try to do was to get town council to weigh in on the legality of the proposals. I would intend that our next meeting would go over the specifics about this, and we would talk about individual sections,
Okay.
making sure that this is not by any means a final document. Before we went down the road of proposing things that turned out to be not legal, I thought it would be worthwhile that we all had a document that we agree on is potentially viable, and then we can tweak it along the way.
Sure. That makes sense.
Okay.
Oh.
Anyone else? Rebecca?
Yeah, I had one quick question about H, which required the owners to have the permits in place. Would it be acceptable to, and is there some way to require that they have proof that the lot it can be legally developed?
no. Well, I mean, again, they're entitled to make whatever decision. Let's say they wanted to do demolition because the next door neighbor just wanted their land for assemblage value. I mean, it could be an old grant, and in fact, in many of these instances, these lots are not buildable after, like in the picture, say a little coastal village town that has postage stamp size lots, probably completely non-conforming. So, you know, people are entitled to make stupid decisions, and stupid is in the eye of the beholder sometimes. So if they want to demolish, I don't see how we're in a position to challenge the wisdom of that. We're just trying to get them to maybe take a second look and take a deep breath before they actually do it.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Michael, I have a quick question, and I apologize because of course I was a late arrival to the meeting, having been in class. But can I just ask couple things of Mr. Tallerman? One is on 63(3) paragraph G, and then going down to 63(3) paragraph H2. This is language that's sort of remained from an earlier iteration, the present iteration of the bylaw, and it always seems to me to be in conflict, where it says in 63(3) if after public hearing, the building is preferentially preserved, the commission shall notify the building commissioner in writing within 5 business days, and no demolition permit may be issued until 9 months after the date of the determination by the commission. And then you get down to paragraph H2, and it says that, you know, you can basically, the commission can, the building commissioner may issue the demolition permit for a preferentially preserved building at any time after receipt of written notice from the commission stating either, and subsection 2 there is that the commission is satisfied that for at least 9 months, the owner has made continuing bona fide and reasonable efforts to locate a purchaser, and so on, and such efforts have been unsuccessful. I've never understood why H2 was necessary if the clock runs out after 9 months. Like,
Kevin, I've always viewed that as a rolling requirement. So if for 4 months prior to the time that they seek a demolition permit, they were busting their butt trying to find a buyer, and they were unsuccessful, throw up their hands, and or for the 9 months prior, or however many months prior. So I think what they're, I interpreted that. I thought it was kind of weird too. I've seen it before, but I think it's a kind of a rolling 9 months. So if what we're looking for is that people try for 9 months to preserve a property, if they've already done it for 8 months and you find it preferably preserved, and then after another month or so, still no one is answering the calls, say, look, for 9 months, which is what we're after in the first place, they've tried. That's how I've interpreted that. I agree that it's less artful in its language than it could be. But that's how I've always interpreted that provision and the similar provisions that I've seen in other bylaws.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. 2 other quick questions was, I noticed in this document that the phrases preferably preserved and preferentially preserved are used interchangeably. Should those be normalized, that one or the other is chosen? We've always used preferentially preserved, but I noticed preferably preserved is used here.
Yeah, I mean, I think a reasonableness test would probably equate the two, but you're right. If we have the ability to sync everything up, we should. So that's why above I said we shouldn't use both the term designee and appointed agent. If we're going to use a term that has almost a definition to it in this, and it's outcome determinative, in this bylaw, we should be consistent. So that's a
Right,
good
yeah.
catch for
I
sure.
think we'd all like to be this version to be as ironclad as possible, which leads me to the question about, I think this was 63(6)A. There's rhetoric about who tells the building commissioner that a building is significant, and then it turns out that it seemed to me a kind of circular logic that was at play there.
Bless you.
Am I right where that, yeah, if the building commissioner has reason to believe through visual inspection or other means that a significant building may be undergoing demolition by neglect, then the building commissioner shall notify the commission and the owner, and the commission and the building inspector shall jointly hold a public hearing to, one, confirm whether or not the building is a significant building, and whether or not, so in other words, the building commissioner has to know somehow that a building is significant, and then we have to have a hearing to determine whether or not the building commissioner was right. I just wondered if there was some way we could figure out to phrase that, because it's a significant point. If who goes around basically town looking at historic buildings, and someone says, gee, it seems like this important building is being neglected to the point that it is, in fact, the owner is engaging in demolition by neglect, and who gets to say that? And
Kevin, I'll weigh in here for just a second.
yeah,
There's a bit of history behind this.
Mhm.
Most of the bylaws says if the historical commission has reason to believe.
right,
But at town meeting and before that, there was considerable opposition to have us be the building police.
right.
So this was thrust on the building commissioner as a somehow to be an objective party that would be in the normal course of events actually monitoring the buildings in Southborough and reviewing what is going on with them. So I think it was a bit of an awkward compromise, but I personally would not want to try, nor would I endorse trying to change the language of this.
Right.
Considering how hard fought it was to have this clause. The whole demolition by neglect thing almost sank the proposal in the first place, because people thought this was very insidious.
Right.
That you could have this this clause. I will say it has never been invoked at all. Neither by us or by anyone else, by the building commissioner, even though I think there are occasions when I think it should have been. But
Right.
in any
Well, I
event,
consider it's actually a thorny issue, and of course it's related to the conversations that the town is now having about the lighting bylaw and the noise bylaw that's being debated. Now, it's the same kind of issue. It's the fear of a kind of nanny state, or who's going to run around and police and enforce this stuff. And I appreciate the explanation on that. I wonder, it's at some point, probably worth sitting down and having a broader conversation about how you engage people on this issue without coming off like, we don't want a whole series of town informants. You have failed to point up your brick building and now you're engaging in demolition by neglect kind of thing. But on the other hand, the reason it's in here is because it's actually a viable concern for us to have.
yeah, and there are buildings in town that are being deliberately let go, at least seemingly deliberately let go, with the idea that they will be more applicable to demolition. As I said, it's not something that we've ever utilized. It would require a very active building department, and that's not what we have now. So I think that in some ways, I wouldn't get too much into the weeds on this, but I think it's valuable should it ever really be needed.
Yeah, I think I think that it's workable. I should probably take another look at subsection C there, because I think the first two sections, on D as well, the first two sections appear pretty sound, because I think that there's a process that they go through where a person has a right to disagree, because it's a hearing on whether or not there's some neglect there. C is a little bit heavy-handed, and I should probably take another look at it. So I don't know under what grounds they could seek an order to require anyone to repair their property. They can condemn a property. They can conclude it's a nuisance property.
Health and safety, I think. I mean, this went.
Yeah,
so-
but that's not this board, though. So
Well,
that's,
but that is the building commissioner in general. So
I know,
this
but
went
there's
to-
so Mike, hear me out, though. The building commissioner already has that authority, as does the Board of Health, as does the select board, but only in the instances of an actual safety thing. So a historical commission bylaw I worry a little bit about it. Anyway, I want to take another look at section C. And just kind of,
For a historical note, this was questioned by the Attorney General's office and was resolved with the previous town council. So there should be some records on the discussions there.
yeah, no, it's fine. And it sounds like one of those things where the Attorney General would say, speak to your town council about it. It's because that's their general mantras. They're not going to, it's really more concerning in the enforcement of it is than patently wrong on its face. So, but let me take another peek at it, because the subsection C and then by relationship subsection D could raise some concerns as to exceeding the jurisdiction of a historical commission bylaw, but I'll take a look at it.
Okay. I mean, interestingly, the thing that was the critical issue for the Attorney General's office was the last part of C about undue economic hardship and whether or not the building commissioner was legally able to make that determination. So I think they went back and forth on this. I wasn't part and parcel of the discussion, so I don't know, but
Yeah, I'll try and get the records from it and see what it says. I'm not sure ultimately you need it, because I think A and B are accomplishing what your goals are there for it. So
my vote is the less we have to change or remove, the better. But whatever the commission decides is
Right.
approved, and you think.
Yeah. No, and I'm also not of the mind. I'm not going to suggest to you that if a bylaw provision already exists, that you get rid of it because for some reason it didn't get scrutinized sufficiently as I want to. But to the extent that anyone has a concern about it, then I think we want to take a fresh look, we can. I'm not trying to be heavy-handed and say a past town council or a past historical commission made a mistake by implementing this. Leave it if it already, if things already exist, even if they're problematic. I think it would be very, very difficult to get away with enforcing C at all, but that's not a concern.
Excellent. Anyone else before we move on to the rules and regulations? Hearing none, we're moving on to the rules and regulations.
All right. So I had a few, let me see, get to them. I had a few things here. Everyone can see them?
I'm still on the old one. I'm still on the proposed
Hold on.
changes.
Okay, hold on. Maybe I have to X out of it. All right, hold on. Oh, the screen share again. Get to it. Here we go. Everyone see that now?
There we are.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so some of these were questions, and some of them were more concerns. So I'm not sure why you'd need a required. Now, if someone has a survey plan, I think that's fine. But
Well, let me tell you the genesis of this. So we were tasked with trying to rectify 45 Highland Street, which because of an absolute screw up with the building department, they gave a very confusing building demolition permit that was misinterpreted, and the homeowners collapsed the building and destroyed the house. So when it came back to trying to figure out what could be even rebuilt, or, you know, because the site was non-conforming. It was in Southville with, you know, built up, it was like within 10 feet of the property line on ledge. There was all sorts of other issues. It turns out that there had not even been a certified plot plan for the demolition permit. And I think that's pretty much a requirement generally, if you're building somewhere or demolishing something, that you know where the boundaries of the property are, and which in this case, because there was debris on the other side of the, you know, on the neighbor's land. So this is something that was requested with our discussions back and forth with the previous town council about things that should be part of this package to make sure that the people knew where the property actually began and ended. Does that make any sense?
No, that does, and that's helpful. I think what we should do is that if it exists, because I think someone can demolish their property without the benefit of a survey plan. So I think
But can't we require that? I mean, why can't we require that?
you could require someone to go out and spend money on a plan that they don't need. I don't know. They're
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, you know, working in the landscape design field, we don't begin any type of project or demolition or construction without a certified instrument survey of the property, for fear of 10,000 problems occurring.
okay. So if they have it, they have it, but I don't think it's required. All I'm saying is if it exists, I don't have an issue with it. Same thing with the appraisal report. Well, one, I'm not sure ultimately of the utility of it, but someone might not have one, or if they have one, it could be 50 years old.
Well, again, the idea there was that if we were to take action and try to help with the rescue or finding potential other buyers or any other kind of thing, that we would need some value, idea of what the value of the property is.
Well, you have the assessment.
Yeah, but
But-
that's traditionally way off.
Well, it is, but someone may not have it. So I think this language was a little bit better because it says most recent. But again, I think it's a question of if it's available. Certainly, if they've got one sitting in a drawer, then sure, provide it. Same thing with a plan. If they have a plan, great. But I don't think you can compel someone through a demolition delay process to do a prospective survey plan if it's not required. I mean, I agree with you. If someone has significant plans, they may have a survey plan, but they may have also just had a conversation with a builder who wants to buy out their site. And they just said, okay, here's a PNS, you know, and they may not have that survey.
Well, I think this point relates very much to the discussion of whether or not that business of having all the plans and permits is going to be viable in the demolition delay bylaw. Because if that language does stand to some extent, then a certified instrument survey plan of the property would be part and parcel of that. But if that language is not going to stand, then perhaps, you know, I just think it hampers us in any efforts of rehabilitation. If you don't know, you know, the definitions of the property, where the building sits, what the setbacks are, how would you potentially go about doing any type of research to find other buyers?
So maybe what you should do is put in the bylaw or in a reg, you know, when you have a provision already that allows for some fair access, you want to do your own survey. If one doesn't exist, have at it. If you have some funds around or can do that, or you can, if you're
Jay,
working.
you know what our
someone-
budget is?
I know, but maybe.
We don't have
maybe
funds for
you're-
anything.
But maybe you're working with someone else and they have it. You just can't compel someone under this process. Again, if someone wanted to do something affirmatively with the property, like planning board, site plan, or whatever, you could certainly require a plan, but here they're just trying to take a property down, so I'm not sure ultimately we could compel it. I'd say keep it in and then just, maybe just say if available. And I would even take something older than 6 months, because ostensibly the survey hasn't changed much in terms of the boundaries. Maybe some of the topo has changed, wetlands, a little bit of that, but I'd take any certified survey that they may have. So seems to me to still be valuable, whether it's 6 months old or 6 years old, in terms of what you're describing.
All right, I'm going to pass on this one for now.
Okay.
I think this is such a very valuable tool if we are really being.
I think it is valuable too. I'm just saying what I think you can require and what you can't from doing something from the ground up. If they've got it, they should provide it. If they don't have it and they have no interest in providing one, I don't see how you can compel them.
Can't the building commissioner require this? I mean, part of the issue is we got involved in trying to help redo their website, which is contradictory in the extreme and leads you to all sorts of dead ends. To get a demolition permit from the building commissioner, can't that just simply be a requirement? I mean, in a lot of towns, to take down a fence, you need a certified plot plan of the property.
I honestly don't know what the building code requires, but I'm not aware of it requiring a surveyed plot plan to demolish something. So I don't know, but it wouldn't be here.
It wouldn't be. So is this a question?
Part of demolition permit is part of a building code. So.
Well, maybe it could be thrust onto the permitting process. It's just that, we were faced with this issue on 45 Highland where, no one knew exactly where the house stood. So, whether it was going to be rebuilt or whether it was a potentially new buildable lot. Eventually, I think they worked it out by, grand peopling it in. I forget exactly how this was done, but the real problem there was the fact that this whole process of both construction and destruction was operating without any type of knowledge of where the boundaries of the property were. So,
well, again, there's only so much you can police. There are certainly pitfalls for a property owner that is doing something inappropriately with respect to activities on someone else's property, but I'm not sure that that's your issue.
Well, it got thrust into our issue because these people managed in this process of demolishing an historic home. And, despite our best efforts, the house that replaced it looks pretty bloody modern. So, I mean, to the degree that
I'm not sure what that has to do with the survey, though.
Well, in this case, the survey was the fact that they had no idea exactly where the house was located on the property. And so when they were trying to do all this building, the whole process, they didn't have the sufficient permitting in place to actually do what they were intending to do, I guess is my point. But that's really the building commissioner's problem, I guess, and not ours,
right.
Is what you're saying.
Yep.
Just for the third thing, we went back and forth with this with the previous town council, and
what's the third thing? The determination of substantial.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he decided that this was probably best here, and this was also Mass Historical's recommendation because it can be more easily modified within the rules and regulations than it can be for.
I kind of disagree with that because the definition, so a regulation can't regulate something more stringently than a bylaw does. So a bylaw speaks to, hey, if you're going to take a whole house down, and we know that we're going to impose a delay. If you're just going to take part of it down, that doesn't appear at face value. And I know this issue came up recently, and I came up on the side of, a partial demolition still sounds like demolition to me. But I think if this was put into the definition of demolition in the bylaw, it would be clearer. Now you could define what it means here, but the bylaw itself, there should be notice served that a substantial demolition, partial, substantial, whatever you may put in there is also triggers the 9 months. So I think that it would be better to clearly state that. You could have a 25% standard in here in the regs, but I think we should serve better notice under the bylaw that partial demolition could still put you under a demolition delay.
I'm fine with that.
I think it's a good idea. You raised a valuable point when it came up in another context, because someone wasn't really applying for a demolition permit. They're applying for a building permit for renovation. So it's not always going to be a demolition permit that triggers it. So I think that would be a valuable way. If we need another trigger, we'll do another trigger.
Well, and that was in fact the problem, because there seems to be a terrific amount of confusion in town about a difference between a building permit that requires demolition and a demolition permit.
Yeah. So let's remove that confusion.
Absolutely.
And I think that the place you remove that is in the bylaw, not in the regs. And you could get more into the weeds and the details as to what substantial is in the regs, but you should serve notice in the bylaw, which should be the Uber document here, that that could trigger it as well. That would be a better use of it. We could work on that language, but I think it's a good idea, and it could really help. I think that you have to maybe weigh it. I'm not sure if 25% is the right number or not. That's up to you all, but I think we could certainly support it. Or for a partial demolition, maybe it's not a 9 months, maybe it's something else. I don't know. There are other standards too. If someone is doing something to support an in-law apartment or something else, maybe you could figure things out like that. But I think that's a part of a separate discussion that you and your fellow commission members should talk about.
Okay.
All right. So then this, under 4, the action plan, I don't mind you requiring them to do some kind of, to at least open up and as part of the cooperation and give you the information that they may have available. I just don't think you can require them to participate in the preservation part of it. And that this goes back to maybe some of the original discussion we had. I think we're okay asking for their cooperation, the ability to access the property for photos or surveys, or introduce prospective buyers or preservationists, but compelling them to give you reasons and to engage in any kind of outreach on their own. I think it goes beyond what we have. The thing we're imposing upon them is a delay. If they don't want to play ball with you, I don't see how we can compel them to do that.
So
that's why I flagged.
Your problem with the C should be historical commission, by the way, not society. I just see that. So is your problem with the last part of this, the failure of the applicant to cooperate? Is that the problem?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's a bigger problem. Again, I think you should encourage. I think there should be more of an emphasis on encouraging them to work with you. And but
well, the encouragement is to get out of jail sooner card.
Right, but that's at their discretion. They may be perfectly fine with staying in jail for 9 months.
Well, of these A, B, C, D, E, are any particularly?
Well, I think the reasons demolition is sought is perfectly fine. Even if they wanted to say none of your business, fine, give us something. and you could certainly have a questionnaire to them and provide that. But if they choose not to play with you on this, then that's fine. They don't have to answer it. I think it would be helpful if during the hearing that you sought out answers to these, but they may just answer with like, look, I don't like the house anymore, or I hate historical houses, or whatever it may be. But I don't think that we can compel them to do much of this. And I certainly don't think that this could be a reason that we could hold their 9-month process open longer. So again, if they have existing building plans for it, sure, provide them to us if they're existing. If they have communications with preservation societies, if any, I think we can ask them to provide whatever they've got. I'm just not sure at the end of the day how much we can essentially elongate the 9 months by penalizing them for not playing ball with us. I would hope that everyone would be good and recognize that you all are trying to fight the good fight and preserve an important part of Southborough's history, but not everyone's like that.
That is the understatement of the year, my friend.
No, it's unfortunate. You've got some beautiful homes. I wish everyone found a way to do it. That said, there's also a lot of people that have tried to renovate a house and it ruined their lives or ruled their lives for years and years and years.
Yes, I know. I've watched many of those shows. So, Jay, for next steps on this, do you want us to take a crack and send this back to you, or would you want to just redline some of the stuff that you think needs to be changed and send it back to us?
What I think I've done here tonight, probably more than I should have, is dominate conversation. You've got other board members, and I think it's more fair for you all to kind of talk amongst yourselves in this. I'm available as a sounding board. I'm sure Mark would allow access for that purpose. We've got plenty of time before Springtown meeting to work on this. So I think next steps would be for you to build consensus on your board, or at least get some other questions that I could help answer. I feel a little bit badly because I feel like I'm saying no to things that are important to at least some of you. And so I don't want to seem like that, and I don't want to be heavy-handed. It's your bylaw, it's your town. I'd like to get you exactly where you want to be and push the boundaries of preservation. The lawyer in me gets me concerned. I have to be necessarily conservative, which isn't my regular bent on these kinds of things. If I was in your position, I might not want to be as conservative, but I have to, as counsel, take a kind of a constrained view. So take that with a grain of salt, I think.
All right. My only concern is that we are now operating without rules and regulations. So my priority, and I'm about to throw this open to our friends here, my colleagues, would be to get some of these rules and regulations up and communicated for people, because we have permits ongoing. So, to the degree that we could prioritize this, I think that would probably be wise. But let me just throw this open to my colleagues and hear what they have to say. Colleagues?
Hi, Michael. Can I ask Mr. Tallerman, given that we don't, in fact, as Michael just indicated, have rules and regulations now posted because they've been found to exceed what's permissible under the bylaw that we currently have in place, I'm just curious about advice as to how we can proceed in the months going forward to deal with demolition requests sort of fairly and expeditiously within the bounds of the law, given that we don't have rules and regs now on file, and that while we work through hopefully a new iteration of the demolition delay bylaw to bring to a future town meeting, hopefully next May, with new regs, how do we operate now?
I don't think you need the, I mean, having regs is nice. I'm not saying they wouldn't be useful, but I don't see the lack of regs as being preclusive to you enforcing the bylaw. I mean, they're helpful. They're just but they're a guidance tool more than anything. I think the bylaw stands on its own, and you can have robust hearings on the properties that come before you without those regs at all. They're just value added. But I don't see why you can't have a thoughtful hearing and discussion and dialogue with a property owner on this, irrespective of these regs.
Well, I think the problem is that people want to know what we want to know. And so,
Tell them.
Well, I know, tell them, but then you get into the question of whether or not this can be mandated, what information is required. The information that's currently required is hugely minimalist, which has been part and parcel of the problem.
So I don't think, if the core mission here under the demolition delay bylaw is to impose a delay so everyone can catch their breath and hopefully save a property, it would be really, really hard for anyone to challenge a decision by this commission to preferably preserve a property for 9 months. If you had any grounds whatsoever to do that, you could take, one man's trash is another man's treasure. So someone comes to you with so right now it's 1926, but if the 75-year rule went into play, for example, there's a lot of houses that came up post World War II that to some people are not particularly historically significant, but a lot of that design to other people is really, really important, really part of an important movement in American architecture. So if you had any grounds whatsoever for even like a post-war kind of raised ranch style, whatever it may be, and you wanted to preserve it under any reasonable grounds, no one is ever going to win that battle against you, whether you have a reg that explains that or not. It's important to you and you can rationalize why it's historically significant. I'll defend that decision all day long. Those are easy. You're going to be given really wide berth by the courts on any challenge to that. These are almost unchallengeable anyway, because no litigation happens within 9 months anyway. So by and large, it'd be really hard to overturn the commission in any event.
Got it. Any other questions, my friends?
I have a question.
Okay.
You can hear me. Yep. Sorry. Hi, Jay. Thank you so much to everybody for their time working on this. I think the clarified language is incredibly helpful. I have a clarifying question. So it's my understanding based on this conversation that we as a commission cannot compel people to provide us with any information. We can encourage it. We cannot compel them to provide it. And the second part of that question is most importantly, we can't compel them to provide us with information that would require them to spend money to get that, like a survey on their property. Am I correct?
Well, I mean, to the extent that it's information that's germane to the initial determination, you can certainly have it as a requirement. Again, I want to be mindful of the fact that the breadth of your discretion is either, again, preferably preserved or not. So really the information that they're providing is to help them convince you to find that it's not preferentially or preferably preserved. So it serves their best interests. I do think that compelling them to provide things that might not be germane to that analysis might be difficult, but again, I think it really is going to come up more in terms of whether or not there's a dispute or at all over the preferential preservation of the property. So anything that's on hand that helps with that would be in the normal course of record keeping for a property, I think is fair game to require it. So that's why I said if a survey exists, if an appraisal exists, if old photographs of the property exist, I think it's okay to require that. The question comes up, what if someone doesn't provide it to you?
Right, okay.
You know, but I think those things that are helpful to you making an assessment of the history are fair game to do it. A lot of people will have old records of their homes on hand, especially if they've had it for a while. And I have no problem with you guys requiring that kind of stuff on a if they exist thing. Requiring that they do a survey that they don't have already, it's to me probably a little bit beyond.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yep.
You know, just getting back to the survey, I'd like to get some clarification from the building department about when a plot plan, certified plot plan is required. Because I'm pretty sure that if you are planning to do any sort of building, you need to have this, but it's so if
Well,
it's.
there's a difference between a plot plan and a full survey. So
Well, I'm talking about a certified plot plan that guarantees where the boundaries are. I think that's really, we're not talking about a topo. We're not talking about, conservation easement.
no, I know what you're talking about. I'm not sure ever a stamp surveyed plan is required for a generic building permit to construct a house if there's another reliable means of determining the boundaries of that lot. So there's a big difference between a certified plot plan and a new ground up survey.
Well, then, so can we change the language to request a certified plot plan?
Again, if they've got one, I mean, let's ask the building commissioner what's required for a demolition permit. If the entirety of their demolition permit application has any relevance to you, then the building commissioner should provide that to you anyway.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think when you buy a home, you get a certified plot plan as part of your escrow deeds. But then if there's been changes subsequent to that, it goes back to your question, Michael, about did the building permit require certified or not plot plans? So maybe iterations come across that. My question for Jay is in the action plan, and I agree with Michael. There's nothing on the books now, and actually Kevin brought this up. There's nothing posted in terms of how we want you to proceed. So it comes down to the pure letter of the law, and all we really can do today, I think, is put a 9-month hold on it. But the owner can sit tight. They can just kind of ride it out, and at the end of that period of time, as I understand it, the ball goes back to them. I think it does make sense to provide some expectation, but it is a situation where it would obviously have to stand up to a legal challenge. So I'm saying I'm in favor of us trying to refine this language in the near term, well ahead of town meeting, so that if additional properties come up for review, we've got some rules and regs that are appropriate and within the constraints of the current DDBL rather than waiting for a new one.
Well, and if for no other reason than simply to make sure that we're operating with the same requirements for everybody, so that just for our own internal guidance, so that we have some level of consistency between one application and the next. I think it's important that we have something in writing. So we'll work on that, hopefully for next meeting. All right.
So
Anybody
I don't have any questions for council. I just wanted to say thank you so much for this conversation. As a newer member of the commission, this has been really valuable in helping me understand, the bylaw in greater depth and our role in, enforcing it. So I just wanted to say thanks to, to Jay and to Michael for all of your work on this. It's been immensely helpful for me in my role as a commissioner.
Welcome.
More than welcome.
Happy to help.
Anyone else before we say goodbye to our town council? Hearing none, I say, Mr. Town Council, thank you for joining us.
Great. We'll talk to you all soon.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Okay, now that we know everything we've always never wanted to know about the demolition delay bylaw. Oh my goodness gracious. Well, I got a bit of work cut out for us, my friends. I'm just
Somebody
looking.
wake up Rebecca, please.
She does seem to be set there. I think she's frozen. There she is.
Sorry, Rebecca, I couldn't resist with that picture just staring at me.
I'm sorry, I had a board meeting before this meeting. I'm exhausted.
But actually, I should get one of those too. So I just like a frozen smiley face. It's like, it's like maybe it could move around a little, just kind of in slow loop. The dog could be behind me wagging his tail. All right, folks, this has been great. I want to thank you again for coming on board and explaining this to us. It's been very helpful to hear this measured and non-emotional and non-politicized discussion of this. I think it's just been hugely reassuring to me, and I hope it's to you all, that we're on the right track and that we're going forward. I personally was really pleased that, especially with the changes to the DDBL, there was as few suggested changes as there were. So obviously we're getting there, folks. Next time we will discuss this in detail amongst ourselves, now that we know that we have a legal document to work from. So if you have questions, concerns, I know designee, all that kind of stuff, we'll put that on the agenda for our next meeting.
Can I ask one question, Michael? I'm sorry. Just before we moved on, just a question I had that I sent to you and Rebecca via email, but if you had wanted to talk about this some more, you can kick me off until a couple minutes. Were you done talking about that stuff?
Oh, do you have some other issue you want to bring up?
I did, yeah.
Oh,
Just a quick question.
about the demolition delay bylaw?
No,
Okay, some other issue. Yes, no, we
Yeah.
can move on to others. So we're done with the DDBL and the regs
Okay.
for tonight, right, everyone?
Yep.
Yes, okay. All right. Any other business that may legally come before the commission? Kate?
yeah, just a quick question that I had sent just to Michael and to Rebecca, and if anybody else can answer it. Brian Ballantyne just reached out to me about, is there something in writing saying that the townhouse is now on the National Register of Historic District that I can provide him?
Yes, sorry, I didn't answer that question.
No, fine. I started to
So
look
the-
through all my emails and stuff and I couldn't find anything.
We have written a letter to the CPC many times about the historical significance of that. So if somewhere in our minutes, we would have that letter. I don't have no idea where, but they asked us again for the CPC application. So the townhouse folks, John Parent might actually have that letter because I know we wrote that to him.
My impression from Brian was that actually not that it was something from us, but that it was maybe from a higher level, like from Mass Historical saying officially, like, is there a report somewhere?
No, it's either or. It's either a letter from us or it's on the state register.
But I think, it's not done yet though, right, Michael?
Well,
I mean,
no, it is now on the state register because as part of that application process, in order to get that $50,000 grant, they actually put it on the state register, but it hasn't been updated. So I don't know how you get the registration from the state to say that. So in default of that, I would simply take the letter that we wrote. And again, I think John Parent would have a copy of it because it was within reasonable memory that we wrote this within the last year.
Okay. All right.
In supporting of the historical significance of the townhouse.
All right, I'll
So-
send that. I'm gonna be working in the town hall tomorrow, so I'll talk with Brian and see if that helps.
for reasons
That-
totally
it should be in our
inexplicable.
minutes. It should be in our minutes as well from, we had to vote on that or some
Yeah,
sort of
we did.
language for the CPC.
Where that is, I have no idea. So we'd have to be sought through the minutes.
Yeah.
But it was within the last go around of that.
Yeah. No, I think John Parent might be a good resource on that too.
So
So,
no, because I had
Yeah.
to write him this letter because he asked me for it.
Right,
So
right,
So
right.
he'll have a copy.
okay, sounds great.
I'm so tired. I don't even know.
Sorry
what
to bother you with that.
It's like,
Sorry.
no, it's like, okay, yeah, I remember that now. I have no other business for us. Does anyone else have any other business they would like to discuss?
I've got one quick thing, we were contacted by the Southborough Cultural Arts Council chair.
Thought about that.
Yeah, which is Mary, I hope I don't mispronounce her name. P-cards.
P cards.
Okay, and she's quite nice. I had a back and forth brief email exchange with her regarding the Cultural Arts Council's interest in a cultural district, which she feels could interest and involve us on historical. And I just wanted to bring that out there that she was hoping to come to a meeting very soon, maybe perhaps our next one, if we can get this scheduled, and talk to us about this idea of a cultural district and whether we can do some work together on that score. So I just hope to get that on the agenda and see if Mary's available to attend our next meeting if we have.
Yes.
We've been hung up with the downtown, or the,
What? You've been hung up with it now.
well, there's that too, but I meant that we've been hung up with these, the demolition delay and some hearings and trying to play catch up. So, but I'd like to get.
Goes to Halloween to shame there about haunting those meetings.
Yeah, but I'd like to get to Mary and the cultural district thing and hear. I'm very interested to hear what she has to say, and I'm sure
Absolutely.
all as well.
Do we need to meet before the 8th? Oh, why does that? That's all I have to do is click on my thing and it disappears. We don't have a date set for our next meeting, do we? Whoops, there goes my dog. We have a meeting date set.
I have the 18th of November marked in my calendar. Maybe I made that up. I don't know. Maybe.
I have 6 p.m. on the 14th.
That's a Sunday.
No,
No,
Oh.
the 14th is on a Thursday.
Wait, I'm looking at October, right?
Yeah,
We
No,
need
I was looking at November.
we need to meet before the 8th for the
Yeah.
public hearing.
We've got it in for the 14th, Thursday, 6 o'clock.
Okay, but we need to meet before the 8th for the public hearing. So I'm proposing, okay, how about Thursday, the 4th of November? And I will send this off to the building department tomorrow.
So I have a CPC meeting at 7 that evening. I could do it earlier.
I don't care. Anyone have any, Kevin, what days are you teaching this Monday, Wednesday?
Monday, Wednesday.
How about Tuesday? That's election day, but we're not electing much this year in the state.
I can do Thursday at 6 if
Well, I think you'd want to be here for
it'll
the
last more
discussion.
than an
Mary.
hour.
I don't know how long it'll just, but I mean, she's really interested about this and there's some funds available. And this goes with this idea that I've been proposing of linking the cultural assets of the spaces in the area next to the museum. So, I mean, how about Tuesday? Is Tuesday okay? The 2nd?
I don't think it's a likelihood, but November 1st is special town meeting. And it's not till 7 that night. Like I said, I don't think it's a likelihood that it would carry over to the next night, but I'm just throwing that out there.
God. Well,
God help me.
if it's inside, many people
Oh.
maybe are not going. So it may be a short meeting.
It's inside right now. Yeah, I'll be,
Yeah,
well,
no,
I'm
not
working at
happening.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so not happening. That's where we really need vote by proxy. I mean, we can do Thursday and try to do it quickly. Do you want to do Thursday? We can meet a little earlier if that's all right. We could do 5:30.
what Thursday?
Thursday, the 4th.
Works for me.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
fine with me.
Okay,
Yep.
so let's do Thursday, the 4th. And Kevin, could you please remind me to send out the notice tomorrow to the, just nag me to send it out for the public hearing notice to the building department?
My
So-
specialty.
Yeah, we'll send it via pigeon, carrier pigeon, to make sure it gets there.
Michael, are you talking about moving the 18th to the 4th or in addition to the 18th?
No, moving to and canceling the 18th. Okay. All right.
And for December, are we still looking at the 16th?
That's fine with me. I mean, it depends on what comes up.
Right.
There was another building demolition permit that came up. I forget exactly what address, but I bounced it back to the building department because it was incomplete. Since they are holding us to the letter and chapter and verse of the law, since it didn't have all the required information, I send it back. So when it comes back, we'll have to have a hearing. Maybe we can do this all on the 4th. But until then, I think we're good. I want to thank you all. I know this was long, but I think it was hugely helpful to us. And I know some of you've had really long days. Kevin has to drive home. You're still at Emerson, aren't you? Yes. I love the sign behind you. New occupancy 1.
Jeepers, you're
Or
right.
modified occupancy 1. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, to be alone in that office. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Right. thank
Hugely
you.
appreciate your time, hugely appreciate your effort, and we'll see you back here on the 4th of November on another exciting episode of the South.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Oh, yes. Oh, and hey, do not forget to sign up to come on our tours, which are October 23rd and 30th with, October 23rd and 30th with the rain dates the following Sunday. I'm preparing terrifically to resume my fabulous tour guide role. And fortunately, I've been prepped with all the paper copies of the historic survey report, and I've learned all sorts of fascinating things about the buildings along the way. So with our headsets going, because we're going to get them through the Historical Commission one way or the other, and with our little prep here, we're off to explore.
Yay.
Hey, Jim, very quick question. Did you deal with the headmaster of St. Mark's for that 4,000 we got from the Choate Fund?
Yes.
Could you give me his email address, please? I'd like to request permission just to walk through and look at the Choate Mansion as part of that thing. I think we should let them know that we'd be coming down the line.
Well, true. And I think he's going to probably want a status update on his $4,000 and how well we're using it.
Well, we just got it. So,
Michael, it's just John Warren at stmarkschool.org.
okay. Can
I
someone,
used to work there until recently.
okay. Can someone just text me that or email me that so that I can do that? Okay, that's great. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good night. Goodbye.
Do we
I
need to-
know.
Wait, sorry.
do
We need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, motion to adjourn.
Okay,
I'll
Second,
second.
okay, second. All right, Annie,
yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
wait, whoops, hang on. The minutes.
No, didn't you push them?
God.
I pushed them to the end of this meeting. Kevin,
Oh.
you had some questions about the minutes from the 18th?
Uh,
I think Dave had questions. for
yeah.
Yeah,
I
and he sent
defer to
some things
Dave.
back to you today at 6.
Yes, the material that Kevin sent me was an older version, and it had been updated since that version. So I sent him that version to look at, and if he goes over that and still has any corrections, I can throw them in, and then I will redistribute it to everyone.
Okay, you know what? I'll just post the current ones as a draft and then we'll get back because they've been nagging me about the meetings for the minutes for the 18th. And does that sound reasonable to everyone? Because I haven't had a chance to even to look at the whatever the changes were that came in tonight. I don't actually see the email for one thing.
Yeah, I read Kevin's edits, but yeah, we can push him because we're meeting soon on the 4th.
Does that sound fine for everybody?
Yeah, I can turn things around quick.
Okay. Well, we just have to vote on them. So we vote to accept them. So I'll just publish a draft or tell them they're not ready. I'll talk to Amy Berry in the clerk's office tomorrow. All right. And so we took, just to make sure, we took no votes. This was all educational. I didn't forget anything else about having to call a roll call vote for anybody on anything. No, it was all
Think so.
information.
Just adjourning. We need to roll call.
Just
vote.
adjourning. Okay, so we've already had the motion. Annie,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Rebecca,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Wyson says aye, 6-0. We're adjourned, ladies and gentlemen, and good night.
Night all.
Right.
Night.
you.
See you later.
Kevin, did you still want to talk to David on the way home, maybe?
Sure, we could do that now if everyone has a moment.
I don't wanna-
No, I
don't
need you to, we need to actually, we're adjourned, so I need to end this
Okay,
and need to do that on a separate channel.
okay, yeah, that's fine. We're
Okay.
just
Okay, good night.